Hi, welcome to your carrier update brought to you by PowerFleet. I'm Mike Vincent. He's Zach Strickland. What's going on, my brother?
So we got our tender rejection index coming down, our demand staying relatively flat.
Yes.
It is not growing or changing that much. It's, we're really right on the level where we were when we started this whole thing back in March. We thought the market was going to stabilize and settle out. Demand was going to decline throughout January, February. Winter freeze happens. Everything goes chaotic once more. Tender rejection rates up around 28%. Mass hysteria, cats and dogs living together. And it's taken us a really long time to pull that tender rejection all the way back down to 21.1%.
All the way down to 1/4 or 1/5 of every load,
Right.
one in 5 loads.
Right. So
awful.
Compliance is increasing steadily, or slowly, I should say, but volume is not having a big impact to that. And why is that, Mike Vincent? Well,
I could tell you.
The next
Let's
chart.
tell them.
Yeah, the next chart will help us explain some of that. Tender volume split into various length of hauls. We've got our local 1 to 100 mile loads up here growing 30%. Short haul 101 to 250 mile loads growing 20%. Tweener freight 450 to 800 mile loads. And long haul freight 800 mile plus loads declining 1 to 3% since the start of March.
Right.
This is, in a nutshell, what's driving a lot of the compliance right now, outside of some other factors such as contract rate increases, et cetera.
Yeah, and there's several reasons for why these are driving those, which I know you're about to get into, aren't you?
Well, let's look at our tender rejection rates real fast to help the audience understand that as these various length of hauls, grow in volume or shrink in volume. Up here, we've got our tweener and long haul freight being rejected around 27, 28%. Down here, we have our short haul at 17% and our local haul at 7.96% rejection rate. So as the volume grows here, naturally the rejection rates, you see, they're below that national average of 21.1%. So that's going to help pull more, or it's going to reduce the natural rejection rate of the aggregate value.
Yeah, because the lower rejection rates are a greater piece of the pie, overall pie. The other part is that it doesn't fracture the markets because the capacity stays in a regional where it's being demanded.
Especially like a market like Los Angeles. So where a lot of the long haul freight, carriers are trying to price themselves into that market aggressively so they can get a lot of that freight that pays a lot more of a premium. Let's look at the map and see where some of the changes in rejection rates are going, and maybe look at an example. So we've got the weighted rejection index here, loosening in red, tightening in blue, and you can see the darkest red shade here in Houston. Houston been a very volatile space. You've got Atlanta here. Also Grand Rapids finally coming down off that high that it's been on. And then of course you do have some intermittent tightening throughout the United States, Allentown, Memphis, and Salt Lake City, and Ontario showing up in the light blue as well. So
yeah, a little bit of tightening there.
Let's look at Houston real fast though.
Okay,
so the Houston market is a good example of what we're talking about with these length of hauls. So we've got Houston rejection rates here in the blue. You see this kind of wave that we see, this wave-like pattern with a lot of undulation in it. And we're down, this is why it's in red. Huge drop from close to 20% to 14.8%.
That is a pretty big drop there
in the last couple of days, really.
Wow.
Not even a week. Huge plummeting value here.
Yeah.
But you see demand actually higher than it was back in March.
Yeah, it's still on a bit of an uptick.
Yeah, a lot of tenders going on in the Houston market. Well, the reason for that is, if we go to our next chart to break this down, you can see the length of haul. Now I'm going to make this real easy for you to look at. Just look at this orange line right here. This is all the length of hauls for Houston over the last month.
There it is.
Relative chart. Orange line, tweener. What was tweener?
The 750 miles.
Tweener was about 450, 800 mile loads, rejected at a much higher rate. Boom, dropped significantly over the last week.
Yeah, least desirable length of haul.
Least desirable length of haul. Tweener loads plummet. So all these others are basically, on the stable path, but we saw a lot less tweener freight coming out of Houston.
Yeah, cities short and long.
Yeah, they're all relatively growing.
Obviously.
They've grown at a relatively stable pace since the first part of July, or the mid part of July, but tweener volumes plummet. And you can see right here, the tweener volumes really drove a lot of the rejection rates at the end of the month.
Sure, sure. that would be effect from the port, I would imagine, quite a bit in the freight mix that's coming through there that's changing things. So, yeah, excellent breakdown. We'll catch up with you a little bit later in the show as well.